Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and today I'm in conversation with a New Jersey-based artist specializing in contemporary art. She creates acrylic paintings with a focus on social impact for cultural thought leaders. Please welcome Jazlyne Sabree. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on and being part of this series. So I want to start off real kind of introductory. It's a way to warm up. You know, you go to the gym, you stretch. You don't just go with the heavy lifting and all of that. So I want to start off with kind of a softball question. Can you tell us about your background, the Jazlyne Sabree story? Where'd you grow up? Things of that nature.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in a small town in New Jersey called Willingboro, New Jersey. And I always say that Willingboro is an extremely unique town because it is a majority Black suburb. And I haven't really found too many of those that are similar. And so that actually kind of really is the, I guess, starting fuel behind what I do. We had access to a lot of Black educators and just some community programming that really strengthened my cultural awareness. From there, I attended Clark Atlanta University, which is an HBCU in Atlanta, Georgia, where I studied art. I did get caught up in the stigma of the starving artist trope. And I was convinced to switch my major to journalism. And I found myself extremely depressed. And so I did end up changing my major back to art. Once I did that, I studied abroad in Florence, Italy, where I picked up painting. And then I came home and I graduated, immediately jumped into a studio space here in Burlington City, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And from there, I had an interest in teaching, at which point I returned to Boston University for my master's in art education. And so today I'm, like Rob said, painting these acrylic paintings with social justice themes to just really start up some important and powerful conversations around some of the issues that we're facing in society.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think having, that kind of arc of, and it really stuck with me, what you said early on of, the starving artist trope. I remember when I was younger, I wanted to be a comic book writer and an astronaut. Those things don't go together at all. And then I had some ideas. I was going to be an engineer, then eventually settled on business. And those latter two were, just people being involved. But I always, like family and, so on. But I always had a creative slant to what I did and how I approached it. And, for me, the astronaut thing was looking at the world from a different perspective. Yeah, I think photographers do that, painters do that, things of that nature. And I think engineers are like problem solvers, and I think you're able to flex that creativity there. So it always was kind of bringing me back to really what I wanted to was this creative thing. And I think the business side, those things kind of go together, but it's important, when you see it, to identify it early. I'm going to go back to this. This journalism thing wasn't going to be for me for the long term. So let's go back to art and be able to have many things branch. It's almost like choose your own adventure, and so many other things can branch off of it.
Yeah, for sure.
So can you tell us about a bit more about your work as, social impact, social justice, and things that are really top of mind, especially in the last few years as more and more attention has been focused on that in a very public sort of way. But people have been doing the work for a long time. And so could you tell us more about your work and what are the main ideas that you're expressing in your work?
Yeah. So, that's loaded.
Please.
So I guess what I would say is in the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years, my work has kind of been going in this direction. I've always been interested in, politics and just social justice in general. I just feel like I have such foundations in that, with growing up and with my dad being, impacted by the social justice system, and my brother, fitting the description several times. Um, and so I just always had a passion for social justice. And I think what really kicked it into high gear in my artwork um, was the Black Lives Matter protests that started with the murder of George Floyd. I just felt like I really need to speak out about all of the things that are impacting the Black community, not just police brutality, but, racism, stereotyping, mental health, education, and just the myriad of things. And so my first series that came out of that movement was the Melanin series, where I created a series of magazine covers that really highlights more of the serious and critical issues that are facing the Black community today, that I feel like the magazines that we already have don't always so readily address. And so some of the topics that I addressed there were like finances and financial literacy, mental health, police brutality, Black fatherhood, and just, Black education. So many different themes came out of that, which was really exciting. And then currently, I'm working on my banned book series, where I'm kind of creating some dialogue around what's happening in a lot of our Republican states, who are, banning books from their curriculum that are written by Black authors that really just tell the story of American history. So it just really raises some questions. And when people see the work, they're just curious about, okay, what book is this? Why was it banned? Maybe I need to take a look and read this book and kind of discover on my own why it may have been banned. But it's just been really an enlightening process for me, as well as all of those who see it. So that's what I'm working on right now, and I'm really excited about it.
That's great. That's great. And yeah. I want to have two observations there. It's kind of ironic, right? Where some of these folks who espouse the, my freedoms, my rights and all of that stuff, First Amendment is freedom of speech, but then they want to ban books. It's interesting.
Exactly.
It's interesting how that works. And I think with that, we naturally, it's a curiosity there. Like, why is this banned? Let me check into this. And I think that that's really, really cool, because I noticed this a few months back, Juneteenth, where, watching CNN, I was like, did they just rebrand freedom? I was like, these aren't the colors of the Juneteenth flag at all. These are like Pan-African colors. It's like, who organized this? I just started having just questions, and I was like, who's involved here? And I think being able to have that dialogue, especially about things that are near and dear in a part of our culture, it's important for us to kind of continue that, whether it be through the oral tradition, whether it be through painting, through art, to kind of keep it going. Because I think when other people get their hands on it, who aren't necessarily considerate of the history around it and the background and all, suddenly then it's rebranded and it's shifted to a different narrative and a different conversation, and this is going to sound wild, but it's almost like your people of color it before you Black it. It's like, this is a Black thing, and it's not to take away from people of color, but it's, it's like, how can we make all of these things one so we can do the least amount of effort?
Exactly. Yes.
So I get loaded too. I get a little loaded.
Yeah. It's definitely heavy work. So yeah.
So could you walk us through your process a little bit, and when you're taking on a project, whether it is you're going to look at do I want to do this? How do I want to go about this? Could you break down a process in terms of what's something you're doing in the beginning, what's something you're doing towards the middle, and how do you know as a painter when you're done? Because I hear that thing that painters aren't really finished; they just kind of stop painting.
Right, that's true. So I think that for me, The process always begins with just a deep state of reflection. I've like in the past couple of months, I've kind of scaled down my my work outside of my studio in order to just create more time and space for daydreaming and just relaxation and allowing my mind to get to a place where it's just comfortable to just think and explore and just kind of ideate. And so it always starts there. I'm just thinking about, you know, my life experiences, thinking about things that are happening in the community, and also getting out in the community and making time to actually be involved in certain initiatives like the NAACP, the Lupus Foundation of America, and just different community organizations, to just really kind of add a little bit of depth and a little bit of, you know, making it personal. So it starts there. And then at that point, I kind of settle on the idea that speaks to me most in this moment. And from there, I kind of begin to research and find out all that I can know about, you know, whatever this issue is. Like, for example, with the banned books, there were some banned books that I know readily off of the top of my head that have been banned, like Their Eyes Were Watching God, or, you know, To Kill a Mockingbird. And so those come really readily. But once you start doing the research, you start to see the myriad of books by Black authors that have been banned. And sometimes they try to spin it as, you know, it's because of the language or this or that. But some of them have outright been banned because they don't want to have conversations about critical race theory. And I like to call it simply American history. And so, you know, I just do a ton of research, and I really try to create a lot of depth in what I'm about to put out into the world. And then from there, I gather all of my resources and my references. And so I'll like send out calls to my family members or to friends, to my students sometimes when I was teaching, for photographs of, you know, whatever poses that I need, you know, whatever kind of setting I need, I'll ask them for photographs and they'll send those to me. And then I will choose from those and get to work. So it's kind of a lengthy process, but but it definitely adds a lot of meaning to the work. And it really it makes it a really fulfilling process for me as the artist to try to go so deep.
No, thank you for really breaking that down for us, because yeah, I think one of the things that's really important, and I've recognized in these conversations, is not only to understand the process, but understand the thinking behind the process, what's baked in, what's, you know, underlaid within that. Because I think people will just think, oh, art happens, without understanding what is baked into it. And that even gets into like conversations around like price. You know, you'll have people will talk to, let's say, I hear this all the time with like self-taught artists, and it's like, oh, you know, you'll have someone walk there and they're like, oh, well, I can do that. Why didn't you do it? And not having any consideration of all the things that go into, whether it be experiences, whether it be training, whether it be just the thinking. Like, people don't put enough time and energy around even considering what goes into something.
Yes, exactly.
So what do you enjoy most about being a painter?
What do I enjoy most about being a painter? There's so many things. For me, I honestly feel that, you know, the art is just a really important factor in my own personal healing. You know, I don't think I could really put it any other way. Like, I feel like just with all that we go through as Black people and all that our ancestors have been through, to the point of just generational trauma and even changes to our DNA. Like it goes so deep. And I think just being able to research so many topics and communicate about it through the art, like even if no one ever saw it, I'd still do that because it's just such a process of release, and also of connecting, right, with where we came from and a lot of these historical facts and lessons that we have never been taught. You know, today I was reading the next book I'm going to be painting about, called the 1619 Project, and I learned that the African slaves in the 1700s were running away from their plantations and joining the British military during the American Revolutionary War. I had no idea.
Right.
None. And so it's just, I think my joy really lives a lot in the research. Like I've joined ancestry.com and I've just been digging in, and the joy is really there because I feel like I am connecting to my ancestors and I'm really kind of living out their experiences in a very deep and meaningful way when you have to kind of absorb all of this and then come up with, you know, something that's beautiful, but also meaningful to communicate that and then also pass that knowledge on to others. So I'm getting chills talking about it because
that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's see. And I think you touched on this, but for the people in the back, that's the way I like to say it sometimes. For the people in the back, as a creator, what do you want to offer the community?
Oh, so much. I think I am a teacher at heart. And so, you know, I've just come from 5 years of teaching in public school. But I'm just truly, I've always been, and I think that's maybe why I also went to journalism and things like that, is because I'm just such a communicator. And one main thing that I want to offer is just this education, because like, I feel like I was privileged in a sense to grow up in Willingboro, you know, which I told you is a small Black suburb. Not too many people know about it. You know, we're oftentimes left out of conversations involving the urban community, but like we're also still very Black and face a lot of those same issues. But I feel very privileged to have grown up here, because we did have access to a lot of Black educators. And when I went to college, I realized that that wasn't the case for a lot of my Black peers, that a lot of them hadn't had many Black educators, if any. And so I was privileged to take a class on, you know, true history of the world, where my favorite teacher, Mr. Carey, he would teach us about, you know, history from start to finish. I mean, all the way back to, you know, Mesopotamia, you know, and then we learned about the Mayas and the Incas and the Olmecs and just, you know, and then we got into Mansa Musa and the Africans who came here first. And then it really opened up a world for me because I'd never learned, you know, world history in this form of depth before. And that's probably what inspired me to go on to a HBCU. But knowing when I got there that there were so many of my peers who were in tears because they hadn't received some of the lessons that I had received when I was in high school, it really opened my eyes and showed me kind of my own privilege of growing up in Willingboro. And I just want to share that knowledge with the world, with the Black community, and in a way that it's palatable and that they can kind of start to explore some of these things that, you know, may not be explored if you didn't grow up here or if you didn't go on to college. And if these things just weren't taught, they're not being taught.
Right.
And so it's just really important to me to share the knowledge that I take on with the community. Can I go on?
No, please.
The second thing that I want to really offer to the community is an opportunity to invest in Black art. I feel like since, you know, I guess since our freedom, if I could say, a lot of the patrons of our own art and culture have been white institutions. And even to this day, I find that a lot of, the Black community doesn't know much about art. They don't really know much about collecting art. And they don't really feel welcome in art spaces. And that's actually something that I did my master's thesis about, is that a lot of our people, we grow up and there's just such a lack of inclusion in the art world. When you go to museums, it's very rare to find a work of art by a Black artist in general, let alone a Black female artist. It's less than 1%, you know? And so I want to really kind of work to change that narrative. And through my art and through the education, just really kind of informing others about the investment opportunities that exist in investing in Black art. We, like you said before, we have to tell our own stories and we have to be the keepers of our own culture.
Yeah. And then hearing, because I've had interviews with Black curators, and, that's another area where it's like, oh yeah, that's like two of us, you're like, wow, excuse me. And, but then it's this desire, and that's why it's important to have the thinking that's baked in, because I've had an interview, post interview, because we didn't record this, but it was still a prudent conversation around, this Black photographer. He's like, people love my work, usually like white consumption, but at the same time, why does it have to be of these people? Like, that's what's baked into my work. That's what my experience is. That's the lens I'm looking at it through. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I've had that too. Like people who are like, well, maybe you can make it more palatable. Or they're like, well, why don't you paint any white people? And I'm just like, well, that's not what the work is about. And all people in the world are welcome to collect my work, but my work is telling very specific stories. And I also feel that I owe it to my history. I owe it to my ancestors to create work that is representational of them, because white people, to be frank, have been doing that already for centuries. They have a wealth of, art that represents them, where they can go into a museum and see their face in a painting. And so it's easy for some people to say, oh, be more palatable, maybe do something more abstract, but I feel like as Black people, we are still in the time that calls for representational art, because we are behind and we need to see ourselves in our spaces. And so,
yes.
Yeah.
And then it inspires the next generation, and it just goes and goes. And it's that one or that two or that handful that are getting out there, and it speaks to, in 10, 15, 20 years, whatever, looking at that next crop of artists that, may have just been born or whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm inspired by this person. And it could be a Black person versus, what we may have encountered. There, I'm sure, are others, but just like there are more opportunities that are out there and more people to take influence from, because they look like you or have a similar background as you, and their work might resonate and hit differently. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So that's kind of the end of the real questions that I have. And I think this, I think we can start off with these rapid fire questions. And the first one is very apt based on what we were talking about a moment ago there.
All right.
So, and remember with the rapid fire questions, let's not overthink them, because we both are probably tend to overthink these things. And let me ruminate on this one for a second. But, so I'm going to start off with this one, and it's just first thing that comes to mind. What I said is what I said. Favorite color. And when I say color, I say that with a U. What is your favorite color? Actually, both have U's in it. Favorite color.
Oh my goodness. My favorite color is blue.
Okay.
I had to catch myself there, not to overthink. My favorite color is blue.
Okay. Are you a morning person or a night person, night owl kind of situation?
These days, I would say I'm a morning person, because I have two little ones who, otherwise I'm going crazy. So,
what is your current phone background?
My current phone background.
Yeah, or your lock screen.
Oh, let me see. I need to remind myself. My current background is of my children.
Okay. So that's a good one. Uh, what was the last movie you watched?
The last movie I watched, it was called, oh my goodness, what was it called? It was a documentary on Amazon Prime. The Truth in This Art. No, this is a podcast. Oh my goodness.
I am a documentary.
I'm speaking something. No, it's a Black documentary that details Black art. So I'm trying to remember the title of it. If I remember, I will tell you. Okay,
this is the last one I have. And since you have two little ones, I think this will be an apt question. Chunky or creamy peanut butter? Which one are you going with?
Chunky or creamy peanut butter? Creamy. Yeah. Every day, all the time.
Very, very smooth individual. It's like, look, I got enough rough stuff in my life. I'm a Black woman. I need some creamy peanut butter in my life. Let's make it easy. So that's pretty much all I got for the questions for today. So one, I want to thank you for coming onto this podcast. And two, I want to invite and encourage you to share with the fine folks, the listeners, where they can find your work, where they can check you out online, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for having me. And you know, I've had a really good time having this conversation.
So where can the folks check you out online?
They can find me at www.jazlynesabree.com or on Instagram at Jazlyne Sabree, on LinkedIn at Jazlyne Sabree, on Patreon at Jazlyne Sabree. So if you type in at Jazlyne Sabree in Google, you will find me everywhere.
as they should. So for Jazlyne Sabree, I am Rob Lee. That rhymes. Saying that there's art in and around your neck of the woods. You just got to look for it.